I am calling this meeting to order. This is the Parks and Environmental Sustainability Committee of the Whole meeting held today, Tuesday, May 27th, 2025, commencing at 4:31. Council members in attendance are Councilmember Stewart, Council Vice President Forsyth, Councilmember Salahuddin, Councilmember Fields, Council President Kritzer. There is one action item to discuss and 4 informational items on today's agenda. I'm going to do my very best to keep us on track today. And the very first item that we have is the acceptance of the Department of Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant Formula Funds in the amount of $100,043,150 for the energy efficiency upgrades at the Public Safety Building. Joining us today is Jenny Liebeck.
Hey, good afternoon, Council. So the Department of Energy's Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program, also known as EECGB, it's a federal program that provides formula funds to local governments. So the funds can be spent on clean energy, energy efficiency, and emission reduction efforts. And so last year, actually probably about 2 years ago now, Redmond was allocated $143,000, and funds have been earmarked for the energy efficiency upgrades project at the Public Safety Building, although no funds have been expended to date. So I will say that the DOE formula funds application process is different from conventional grants, and that when we submitted our project application, we are effectively also executing our grant agreement. And so because of that, I'm here this afternoon to effectively kind of formally secure council's approval of the grant, which is in alignment with the city's policies. So again, the grant has been executed in terms of our relationship with the Department of Energy. It's just for our financial, in alignment with our financial policies, securing council's approval this evening. And so I'm specifically requesting that this item be placed on the June 3rd council business meeting as a consent item.
Before I open it up to questions or comments from council, let the record show that Councilmember Anderson has joined us. And council, do we have any comments or questions for Jenny Liebeck? Councilmember Fields.
So obviously there's no way that any of us would not want to do this. Given the description and the purpose and the fact that we've been planning all along, that's pretty clear. I am a little bit maybe puzzled by how you framed it, that basically it's not really a decision, the decision's already made, and this is just a formality. You know, council's role is, in fact, to provide oversight and make decisions. So is this a normal practice for us that we make the decisions and then come to council to formalize that decision? I'm not sure that I actually think that's a great practice.
Sure, no, council absolutely has the authority to deny this request. Again, no funds have been expended, so if council would like us to terminate the agreement with the DOE, we absolutely can do that.
Is there any way this could have come to us earlier?
I mean, yes, it definitely could have come to you earlier. Yeah, it could have come to you earlier. Again, the process is just different with formula funds, and one that I will personally accept responsibility for. It was new to me. And so again, when we submitted the application, it was effectively executing the agreement. That is not standard. Usually what happens when we submit an application, then we provided a notice of award that then comes to council for approval before we execute the agreement. So it's a different type of funding that was new to me. So it was an error on my part.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you, Ms. Liebeck. Is it true that council actually discussed this project when we accepted the other dollars that are coming from the Climate Commitment Act for the same project? I remember us taking in Climate Commitment Act dollars so that the Public Safety Building could go through those energy efficient upgrades in order to be compliant with the Clean Building Performance Standards?
This is a separate pot of funds. We have discussed this, so it was raised multiple times by council. I believe you had received notification from like NLC and other organizations to make sure that we were submitting our application. So in that sense, we did receive that kind of feedback from council, but this is the first time you're seeing kind of this. It's separate from those CCA dollars, supporting the same project.
Same project?
Yes.
Additional dollars?
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Are there further comments or questions from the council? Ms. Lightback, thank you very much for bringing this forward, and we're looking forward to seeing it on consent. The next item on the agenda, the next four are going to be informational only. And the first one that we're going to be discussing is the East Redmond Corridor Implementation Plan final update. Joining us today is Deputy Director Zach Hoovner. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Good evening, Council. I'm Deputy Parks Director Zach Hoovner, and I will be filling in today for Director Hamilton, who unfortunately came down with an illness. I'd like to hand it over to Senior Parks Planner Cameron Zapata to introduce this item.
Welcome, Cameron.
Thank you. Good afternoon. To refresh your memory, the East Redmond Corridor Master Plan was adopted by Council in 2009. It's a proposed trail network to connect a series of 8 parks on the east side of Redmond, and these include Southeast Redmond, Arthur Johnson, Martin, Perigo Parks, Hanscom Property, Conrad Olson, Farrell McWhirter, and Jewel Parks. They're planned to be connected by a regional trail, which is referred to as the Spine Trail. And this master plan includes conceptual locations for the trail and master plans for each park. Parts of the East Redmond corridor have been built out, but gaps do still exist, and these are between Southeast Redmond Park and Martin Park, and Conrad Olson to Farrell McWhirter Park. Some of the parks are developed with amenities. However, there are some parks that are currently undeveloped, and this includes Southeast Redmond Park, Arthur Johnson, Hanscom Property, and Conrad Olson Parks. The East Redmond corridor will span approximately 3.5 miles, but there are a lot of complexities to it. It includes parks and trails that are both located in City of Redmond boundaries and unincorporated King County, and that requires a level of coordination with the county. Proposed trail locations and the parks are likely located in areas that are encumbered with critical areas like wetlands, streams, steep slopes, and their associated buffers. And this adds to that complexity as there are stricter regulations, restrictions, and mitigation requirements for construction. And because of the size and the complexity of this project, an implementation plan was developed to outline and provide a phased approach to developing the East Redmond corridor. It identifies anticipated permitting requirements, high-level cost estimates, and potential funding opportunities. And this plan doesn't further design, redesign, or modify the existing East Redmond Corridor Master Plan. So staff worked with our consultant, HBB, to develop this implementation plan, and that started back in July of 2024. And HBB had several meetings with the Parks, Trails, Recreation Committee, as well as the subcommittee of the Parks, Trails, and Recreation Committee, or Commission, and staff. The consultant held kickoff meetings with each of these groups, and information was gathered to assess priorities for the project. Then a second meeting was held with the consultants, introducing the different priority buckets of early action, CIP, and planning projects, and then divided them into further priorities of low, medium, and high. And so these buckets included early action. These are the lower cost projects with minimal design or permitting and could potentially be done by volunteers. The CIP, or capital improvement projects, include larger projects that would require more intensive design and permitting and higher construction costs. And then lastly are the planning projects, and these are projects that do require either acquisitions or agreements or just additional master planning, and they'll generally have a longer timeline. So the Parks, Trails, and Recreation Commission staff reviewed the different buckets and priority projects and held discussions on the order and the scope of each project. And at the third meeting with these groups, they were able to review the draft report where the consultants received positive feedback on the amount of effort that the implementation plan took. So with the completion of this implementation plan, it gives staff the opportunity to advocate for the individual projects. And we now have a better understanding of the necessary permits and the associated costs for each step to further advocate for them to get put on the CIP and continue with the development of the East Redmond corridor efforts. So our immediate efforts are to tackle the early action items or the high priority projects. So we're currently talking with our park staff to see which projects can be added onto their 2026 work plan. Thank you.
Wonderful. Although this was informational, are there any comments or questions? Council Vice President.
Thank you. I love seeing that this actually has timelines built into it, because I know this is a process that has continually been kicked down the road, and now that we have deadlines and dates and everything put to it, this is really, really helpful and exciting to see that we're going to be on a solid footing and solid path. Do you have any information that you could share with us at a later point about some of these projects and where they had fallen prior on being pushed out so that we can actually get a better scope of when we're talking with community, some of these projects that maybe were supposed to be done 5 years ago and now where they fall on this plan?
From a high level, just due to the complexities of the whole project, it's kind of the reason why it was pushed down just further down the road. When we did look at the entirety of the master plan, it's very overwhelming, even when it comes to permitting, because we'll then have to coordinate with King County, and it's on their timelines if that location is located within King County. That's kind of the higher level reasonings why.
Okay, so we can now give assurances to community that there's actual timelines built into this planning.
There are timelines. They, with an asterisk of, it depends on resources, both staffing and funding.
Right. All right, thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Fields.
Thank you. So when I saw this coming up on our agenda, I called former council member Carson, who years ago, we both advocated for this pretty heavily, pretty strongly. This was a big issue for him, became a big issue for me. And I called him just to see what kind of ideas or what, is he still in touch with some of the volunteers and some of the community on this, and asked him if he had any suggestions. He mentioned that there were volunteers who were really ready to begin work on this, maybe even provide some partnership funding. There's a bridge to be built. And I guess the question I have, is there something that we can do in this biennium to accelerate the work, leveraging those very interested community members? Do we have the bandwidth? Do we have the resources to actually coordinate and begin doing something in advance of the bigger spend?
We are looking at the high priority early action items. So those things include things like installing benches or picnic tables or educational signage. So those are the things that we're looking into now for 26.
If I can just add real quick. So our parks planning, just as a reminder, Cameron has been holding down the fort for over a year. We did hire our new Green Redmond Partnerships and Volunteer Coordinator, Maya, as well as our parks planning manager. So there are internal staff resources, as well as some of their duties are to perform, the volunteer coordination. So I can't speak for accelerating the process for this year, but that we do have the resources in place now.
No, and I appreciate that. And I guess what I'm potentially hearing is we never know when we engage the community what they're willing to do. That we have to find that out, right? That question's not answered until we go to them. So the fact that we do have resources, we don't have the constraints as much as we did in years past from a staff perspective. It sounds like there is potential opportunity here. Is that a fair thing to say?
I would agree with that statement.
Great, thank you.
Council President Forsyth.
Kritzer.
Kritzer.
Thanks.
Thank you.
No worries.
I caught it out of the corner of my eye.
Two questions. So one is for these high priority trail connections, which I think has been some of the focus of, how we're going to actually make the connections. So just to make sure that I'm understanding, especially the Conrad Olson Park to Novelty Hill Road, and then the Arthur Johnson Park to along the Spine Trail, those two connections. So those are in like the 1 to 10 year period. Is that right? So, and once we complete those, will we have, even if they're not the like full phase of all of it, will that have given us a good connection enough between all these different kind of pieces? Or when is the estimated time period in which you would be able to walk from one end to the other? Is that in the medium, or is that in the 1 to 10?
It'll probably be further out. This one is the one where it's the most complex part. There's steep slopes, I believe there's a stream. So that means there's going to be a lot of studies to happen, mitigation. That's also within the county. It's also within the road. So it's going to be a project that'll be further out. This is one of the items that is on the longer term planning bucket. So it will take a little bit longer to have that be developed.
And would you expect within the next 10 years, at least part of that done, so that we would have more connection between the parks? Or is it more that's also going to be in the further out years? It just was a little hard for me to tell from this report. Like, when will we kind of hit that key point? Or estimated based on this?
Yeah, it looks like the planning is anticipated to take place within that 1 to 10 year range. I can't give you too positive of a timeline. So it looks like high priority for the planning phase. So that's in the next 1 to 10 years. And then that connection from Conrad Olson to Farrell McWhirter on Northeast Redmond Road, and then up to Farrell McWhirter is in that 11 to 20 years. So it'll take some time. It's kind of comparable to the Redmond Central connector. That did take 15 years. So.
Great. Well, that's helpful. And I think it's helpful to know we're starting the planning on these pieces. And when we do the planning, that will also give us more information on the timeline. One other thing I just wanted to note that I think would be great to hear more about at some point in the future with council, or to be able to discuss, is the farmyard for the arts idea at Martin Park. I don't feel like we've discussed that much as part of council, and would be interested in hearing more about the proposals on that, especially given the conversation in community about art space and potential for that, as well as I often get questions about what's going on with that space that we have there.
Yes, I agree, and we can come back and share that. I would just highlight for council that we are kicking off our public arts master plan update. So hopefully some of those questions we brought up with community and incorporate into that final design.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate the chance to read through this and anticipate that this will be another topic of good discussion when we meet with the the Parks Commission next month for the joint session. So I look forward to hearing their thoughts as well. You might not know this, but in my day job, I sit in philanthropy, and then here I sit in government, and I sit at this very, kind of interesting intersection. And when I take in this 20-year plan to deliver on something that we've wanted in community for 20 years, and we've also had we continue to have new and emerging issues, especially related to our parks facilities and our recreation facilities, and just a lot going on. My main question, as I kind of synthesize all of it, is, are we organized correctly to make our dreams come true in Redmond? And I think that we are getting to the point where, when we're going to get serious about this plan, and a few other things going on around town, we're probably starting to need to get serious about the council studying some alternative funding partnerships, whether that be the municipal park districting or creating a philanthropic partner in a parks foundation. I hear frequently how folks are so surprised that we don't have one yet. It's not exactly the government's job to create a private foundation, but Director Hamilton has shared with us in the past that we might be getting close to that moment, and it seems to me we're getting pretty close, especially as we're all asking our detailed questions of Cameron, thank you so much for your patience with these questions, but it is a 20-year plan to realize these dreams. So I'm very interested in the council having a chance to study some alternative funding options before we get into the next CIP, really, if that would be of interest to the council. Thanks so much.
Councilmember Stewart, thank you for bringing up that point, because that was actually almost identical to the point that I was seeing with it with my day job, but from a different viewpoint. In mine, it's all about, personal finances and organizational finance, and how can we diversify our buckets? So that was my question, was alternative funding, to where, when we kind of see things telegraphing towards us, being able to pivot to another bucket, say, okay, that's fine, we can't touch this bucket, or for whatever reason, where can we pivot to, and have those buckets already up and going so that they're there as an option, because options are really great. So thank you for bringing that up. And thank you, Cameron, for being so patient with us today. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Moving on to our second item, informational item, is our 2025 Derby Days overview, because we have blinked and here it is. Derby Days is right around the corner. Sticking with us is Deputy Director Hoovner, in place for Director Hamilton.
Thank you, Councilmember. Is the cadre of staff coming up? I'd like to hand it over to Laura Williams, our Events Program Coordinator.
All right, thank you, Zach. Yes, Derby Days is coming up real fast on July 11th and 12th this year. We have a really amazing partnerships, again, with HopeLink, the Redmond Town Center, and Jerry Baker Memorial Velodrome. And we have a lot of different event elements happening on both of those days. I'm going to talk about the changes from previous years for those of you who are used to seeing a pretty common pattern at Derby Days, and then we'll talk about the event elements that are returning from previous years. So this year we'll have a bubble party that includes a lot of foam that's made out of environmentally friendly material. It's actually the same stuff that they made the fake snow out of at Redmond Lights. And the goal of this was to add a cooling element to the event, because we do get those really high temperatures that we have to plan for each year. And so we are really looking forward to that. That's going to be free to the community. We will also have the RSCC, the Redmond Senior and Community Center, open on Saturday from 12 to 4 to act as a cooling center, as well as to promote the other programs, events, and services that we provide outside of Derby Days. And the King County Library is going to remain open as a cooling center as well for several hours on Saturday and a few on Friday as well. And so we are hoping that this will help a lot of our event attendees stay cool and also lower our chances of heat exposure and related risk. Returning this year will be activity booths. We have 50 local community organizations and businesses that will be participating. They will be hosting free activity booths at the event, and we are excited that this is a double benefit. Not only will they be, getting, they'll be raising awareness of their organization, but they'll also be providing free events or event activities to our attendees. Returning this year will be the beer and wine garden. The cornhole tournament will be on Friday this year. We're going to have additional food vendors this year, and most will be in the parking lot, and we did this to increase accessibility, so those who use mobility aids will be able to access food more freely, whereas on the grass that made it a little bit more difficult. We'll have live performances again this year. And on a Friday at the Jerry Baker Memorial Velodrome, we'll have Friday night racing. They did have a conflict on Saturday this year, so we won't have Derby Days related events over there on Saturday, but we're still looking forward to Friday night. We'll have the Kids Bike Parade and the Grand Parade on Saturday, as well as the Craft Market. And the famous drone light show will be returning again this year, and we're looking forward to that. Okay, some of our goals this year are really aligning up to the park plan priorities, including expanding access for all. So we rearranged a few things on the event layout to make it more accessible, and then we have also made sure to provide more free activities and make it more clear what activities are free so that there's not a cost barrier for either people traveling in or local residents who may not have the funds to otherwise enjoy a large-scale event. We're also honing in on building strong communities, so not only bringing residents, tourists, and local businesses together, but also seeing how we can keep the conversations going with them outside of Derby Days. So hoping to raise awareness of our other programs and efforts across the city that will keep people engaged at Derby Days and beyond. And then also focusing again on protecting the natural environment. So this has been a common theme each year. In the Grand Parade, making sure that we are using human, EV, or RNG powered items and not any gas-powered floats to make sure that we are keeping our footprint as carbon neutral as possible. And also incorporating a strategic waste management plan to ensure that there's no littering and that items are disposed of properly. We'll also be utilizing our cup again this year, which is the reusable cups in the beer and wine garden. And that has been a really great partnership that has actually allowed us to divert a lot of waste and also reduce the amount of water that the beer and wine garden would otherwise be utilizing at the event. All right, so outreach actually began in January, and it is amping up this month and will continue throughout June. And we've have an event website. We've been doing direct email, social media, and other digital outreach methods, and print as well. So far, it's mostly been focused on getting local organizations and businesses involved in the event, as well as volunteers. And then starting this month and continuing until the event, we'll be promoting it to residents and people outside of Redmond as well to come as event attendees. Our outreach methods have been successful. We have, actually, these are updated numbers because when we first updated this for our internal committee meeting, our numbers have increased since then. So I'm gonna be going over our updated numbers. We have 95 volunteers signed up so far and 14 food vendors. There's going to be 72 craft booths and 50 activity booth applications, over 50 activity booth applications were received. And we actually did have to make the tough decision to say no to some, but it's always really nice to see people's drive to be involved in this event. Well, we had 22 parade applications and a ton of sponsors. Lindsay's been doing a great job getting sponsorships, and so our dollars have actually increased to $108,500 for our sponsorships. Other funding is coming from LTAC, and we also had quite a bit of revenue from Redmond Lights that we were able to roll over. And then we have some event revenue as well for the budget. And that is all. Any questions?
Council, any questions or comments? Councilmember Fields and then Council President Kritzer.
Yeah, two questions. In the spirit of environmental friendliness, are we doing anything to discourage balloons from some of the booths? Every year I see a lot of balloons, they break, they pose a danger for wildlife. Are we doing anything to discourage that?
Yes, so we do when people apply to host a booth, we let them know, hey, you're in, we don't actually allow balloons in our parks. And then closer to the event, we'll send them a reminder as well. So we do try to mitigate that as much as possible.
Great. And then the second question, and it's really more for next year, and I've mentioned this a few times in the past. This is our signature event. It's a big event. A lot of people in Redmond come out, and we have some of the largest corporations in the world in here. I'm always surprised that our sponsorships is not in the 500,000 range, the 300,000 range at least. I mean, there are local campaigns that are raising $108,000. So is there something that we could do to sort of impress on potential sponsors of the advantages to them, as well as this is a really important thing in the city? And I'm asking a rhetorical question. I do not expect you to answer that question, but I would like for Mayor's office management to maybe at least think about that when we approach it again next year.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think what we can do is do some market research and see what type of sponsorship levels similar events are doing, and ask ourselves the questions like, oh, could we be asking for more? Like, we could definitely look into that for 2026 and beyond for sure.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
President?
Thank you. I would say it might be helpful for us to be able to see the sponsorships and the amounts, so that way we also know how much we're getting. I know the drones show is sponsored, is that correct?
Yes, Amazon will be sponsoring the drone show.
Great. And is that included in the dollar value of sponsorships, or is that a separate?
That is included.
Cool.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think it would be helpful just for us to be eyes wide open about what sponsorships are we already getting when we talk about those corporations, to know who's pitching in. We see it on the list, but maybe that would be helpful. And also the amount of staff time and effort it takes to seek those sponsorships, and that kind of like ROI, which I know has been a concern of council in the past. But I do think if there is market research on, other cities asking for more, it's good for us to look at that. But I would be thoughtful about, how much time we spend on the sponsorship work, and then how much we spend on the paying for the staff to do that. So. That wasn't my question, but it was a comment. A question that I had was, following up on last year, I think we had, and some of the last years, is that we noted that the parade had seemed to have fewer floats over time, or attendees, and I know there was going to be efforts to try to kind of revamp the parade. Can you share with us any of the efforts that went in this year on the parade in terms of recruitment?
Yes, yeah. Since we limit it to EV and RNG powered sources, I think it makes it difficult for people to have floats. But that being said, we did reach out to a few different organizations to get more performance type items. So far we have a giant unicycle that will be there. I think that will be a fun tie back to our roots around bicycles. And then we will have dragon lion dancers. Sorry, I'm probably getting the terminology incorrectly, but similar to what you see at Lunar New Year parades with like the lion dancers. And then we've also sought out some professional ballroom dancing troupes to see if they could participate as well. And I'm hoping to hear back from Sanka on other performers who would be interested in being in this parade.
Thank you. Appreciate that work.
Councilmember Stewart?
Thank you so much, and I'll just put in my vote now to have the Redmond High Marching Band right behind the council again, because that was a ton of fun in the parade last year. My request is actually, maybe if we could get information on this next month, that would be great. But I want to tie together a couple things that Deputy Director Hoovner brought up before. Derby Days is coming up. The council and our commissioners are going to be in the booth, and the most popular question we're going to get from our awesome neighbors in Redmond is, how can I get involved? Where can I volunteer? So it does sound like to me that you've been able to hire the new volunteer coordinator. That is awesome. If there is a pathway to entry, I know that they're probably still just setting up, but if there's a pathway to entry, a QR code we can point people to in the booth, that would be incredible. If there are volunteer events happening later in the summer and into the fall that we can register people for right then and there, I think we would love to do that. So just tying those two things together, and when you can, I would love to hear an update on just the volunteer programming, maybe at this committee or something else in the future, so we can know how that's going and how we can be supportive of that. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? Wonderful. My only question or comment is around promotability. There's a lot of folks where they're moving in, they don't know exactly where to tap in, how to get information. And while, of course, the city does, what we do, has there been any conversation from some of our sponsors, some of our partners, like the larger corporations, to promote it within? Is that part of our strategy at all in the plan, or is it the promotion piece solely on the city?
So we do, our partners promote Derby Days, and our, I don't believe that sponsorships do internally, at least not formally, promote the event. That is a really great idea, though.
The only other thing I'd add is I think for some of the activity boosts, some of the smaller partners, I know that they also promote on their own social media accounts and through their own networks, but something that we can follow up on.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, thank you for bringing this forward. I'm looking forward to Derby Days. It's always a wonderful time. So thank you. Going on to our next agenda item is the special event permit improvement for 2025.
Yes, and so
Director, blah, 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 blah. Thank you. Deputy Director Hübner is sticking with us.
sorry to cut you off, Councilmember.
No worries whatsoever.
To introduce this item is Lindsay Tusine, our Marketing and Events Supervisor, and also joining us is Alex Clarks, our Program Assistant for Special Events.
Hello. We're going to talk about the improvements made to the special events program. So these are all the community events that happen in our parks. So in the last year, we changed the application process from a 17-page fillable PDF and turned that into an online process that gives immediate feedback. Because one big issue is a lot of incomplete applications, and then they fill it out and they're not entirely sure kind of what the process is after that. So now when they fill it out, they get walked through the process as they're answering questions, and we can kind of front load them on what to expect. So there's fewer surprises once they apply and you say, well, you need an additional fire permit because you've met this standard, or you need an additional business license permit. So to piggyback on that, there's streamlining of those additional permits. So if you have a lot of vendors, you need a business license to cover all of them, and that's through a master event business license. That application was separate, but it was almost identical. So there was a lot of feedback about that being kind of a redundant thing. So I worked internally with business licensing to find a way to merge that into one application. There's some permits I can't merge, like right-of-way if they're going to close a street, but working with right-of-way team to have that more integrated into the application, so they're only getting one invoice for the whole package, so it has more cohesiveness when they look at their permit. And then reformatting our events guide. It was a PDF guide where they go through and turning that into more of web content that walks you through the process. And it's now live translatable because it's on the website and it's more accessible. There was some great feedback. So one event producer who does multiple events here in Redmond and throughout the region said that it was smoother and easier than any process I've ever navigated. So that was high feedback. I enjoyed that. And then going forward, the improvements will focus more internally. So a lot of the improvements were focused on the groups applying. There's still improvements that we can make for the internal process, where there's 14 committee members who I process the applications, work through it with the event producer, and send it to committee where they approve it. And that process can be streamlined a little bit because it's currently all through email. Continuing to work on enhancing visibility for events internally. So that's things like, why are there 20 portable restrooms all of a sudden on municipal campus? So making sure everybody's aware of what's about to get impacted in Redmond. And then also building a program to promote the creation of new events. It's been nice to get a couple new events this year in Redmond, and I'd like to continue growing that where more community events are happening here in Redmond. So that'd be maybe through office hours or workshop type things where we invite you in to learn what it takes to have an event permitted in Redmond.
The only other thing I'll add to Alex's discussion is that staff will be back in June for a PES update on the Events Innovation Fund and next steps with that process.
Thank you, Alex. Looks like we've already got a couple of questions. So Vice President Forsyth.
Thank you. Thank you for the work on this. I know it was a huge lift and a huge desire from community to have this be streamlined. My only question is around private security, and is that option built into the application process to be able to bring in your own private security instead of utilizing the police department?
It would depend on the event. There's some things that would require Redmond Police to at least be the first to do it. So it'd be if there's alcohol at the event or street closures. But if it's an event where you're not meeting any of those criteria, you could use private security. It would depend on what their response to that application is. So it's very dependent on the police committee members' interpretation of what they're applying for, because if it's 10,000 people, they might have that requirement that they need Redmond Police to be there. So it's very dependent, I guess.
In addition, so the other thing that the police are privy to is our Fusion Center reports, and so this will give us real-time, up-to-date information on any threats, liabilities known from both the surrounding community. So that's something that police will always have, ultimately that say in is to protect the community.
Okay, I just want to make sure that there's a clear expectation within the new permitting system, because I know this has been an issue for a couple of sponsor or event producers in the past. So just making sure that there's some clear language around how to go about that process would be helpful. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Stewart?
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your work on this. I understand that there has been a little conversation about whether we can make our mobile barriers available to special event permit holders. These were purchased or were in the budget this time as a one-time purchase in lieu of a CIP project that had previously been near the downtown park. So as you all are going out and having the conversations, whether that's through office hours or whatever, I would be really interested to have you all ask for some feedback. If these mobile barriers were available to you, what is the dollar amount that you would pay for them, and are you interested in them, so we can start to gather some of that feedback. From my perspective, if we have it and it's not being used on any given Saturday, it'd be really great to have them deployed and helping to fund more purchases and the replacement of those in the future. So I hope you'll be able to integrate that into your feedback loop later this year. Thanks.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of interest in using mobile barriers for events, both internally and externally. Sound Transit used them during the grand opening, and that was on they wanted to do that, so that was their rental. And there's some event producers who do events in other cities, and then they came to me and said, "Oh, Kirkland had these mobile barriers," So like.
Yeah, and plus wanting that as we've seen just in very recent news within the last 30 days, there's been several events, instances where there has been fatalities due to not having that in place. So, thank you, Council President Kritzer.
Thank you. So last year, I believe we discussed, this isn't for big events like taking over all of downtown park, but events that might be thrown at spaces like our senior and community center, or kind of more of like room use, which may not be in the scope of this. I'm not sure if it is or not. But that we had set up a program for nonprofits or for organizations within the community. They're doing events that are not designated to create profit. And can you remind me the name of that program? And do we have any information linked from this site or somewhere else on our website about that program? Because I have heard from I've talked to a couple of nonprofits that have reached out about events that they want to do in some of our spaces. And I said, I think there's a new program where you don't have to pay the same rates.
Yeah, off the top of my head, nothing's ringing a bell besides the Events Innovation Fund. I know that we've had internal discussion, and like I mentioned, we'll be coming next month in PES to provide an update on that. There is some criteria that we've outlined that would help nonprofits at special events, both their own events or as well as a part of a larger city-sponsored event. And I believe
Brittany says she has it.
Our Recreation Business Manager will give you more information on that. Thanks.
I knew what you were talking about when you mentioned it. Yeah, so it's actually through like our contractors. So if you want to become a recreation contractor, presumably you're charging fees, but as you said, there are all of these organizations who want to offer a free service or a free event or a free class to community. So they have that potential. So they just apply through that. And then they just say, like, we're trying to do something free. And so there's like a vetting process in that way, because we still have to be, safe and vet all of our folks. But yeah, that is on the website for contractors through the recreation. So not a part of this scope, if that helps you, not necessarily events.
Got it. I had a feeling that maybe it wasn't quite the same scope, but adjacent.
Yeah.
If it's possible for you to follow up just with a link to that, since I've gotten a couple different local groups that want to just throw some sort of class or something like that, or event, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for being in the room, so where you could just jump right in. Are there any other questions or comments on this item? Well, that moves us to our final item on the agenda, and that is an update on the Teen Services engagement. Deputy Director Hoovner is going to be sticking with us to walk us through that.
Thank you, Councilmember. For the record, I'm Deputy Parks Director Zach Hoovner. I'm here today for the first touch point with Council after launching our efforts to the public on March 28th. As a reminder, and at the direction of Council, feedback pertaining to or about the old firehouse are and will be compiled during this engagement and shared in its entirety during the final report out in September, but was not the primary goal of this particular process, which really focuses on teen programs and services. As Director Hamilton has mentioned before, the city is currently working with contractors to assess the structural, seismic, hazmat, and space use analysis, and a report on those results will be shared with Council and the community in a July study session. Community engagement surrounding options moving forward on the building based on assessments and reports will follow. The final report on teen services and programs will be compiled and brought to Council at the September 9th study session. In the fall, the conversation on both the building and the engagement surrounding programs and services will merge as we determine next steps. With that out of the way, the community response to our teen services engagement has been significant. We've generated over 300 questionnaire responses in 8 weeks with participation from all key stakeholder groups. 27% who took the questionnaire are current or future teens, 34% parents and caregivers, 32% community members, and 7% service providers. Our digital outreach and communication channels have reached nearly 7,000 web visits across both the Teen Services page, OFH, and Let's Connect questionnaire, while our utility bill insert reached 7,800 households. We've tabled at 15 in-person events, both ran by the city as well as from our community, from school visits to tabling at cultural festivals and events, with 9 additional tabling events planned through Derby Days weekend. We've conducted outreach to 26 service providers, and the offer still stands for city staff to come and discuss our outreach within community. We've promoted this engagement opportunity across a variety of parks and city social media channels. The initial themes reveals both our successes as well as our opportunities. 4 themes have initially emerged. First, our teen population is remarkably diverse and requires intentional programming and service delivery. 64% identify as LGBTQIA+, while 31% are first or second generation immigrants. 15% have disabilities, and 32% aren't connected to any Redmond schools. Second, there's strong demand but clear access gaps. While nearly 70% of teen respondents use our community center programs, 18% of teens and 30% of parents report using no teen services at all. This suggests we're serving some populations while missing others. Third, teens want a voice in city decisions. Nearly half, or 48%, identified a platform to have teen voices heard in city decisions as their top unmet need. They're not just looking for activities, they want civic engagement opportunities, as well as support for future career and academic success. Fourth, the old firehouse remains the overwhelming preference for centralized services, 63% of teens and 37% of parents, having a preference for preserving and recognizing this legacy of the building and the importance of Redmond's music scene broadly, with some concerns about losing that reputation. We're leveraging this engagement to strengthen our approach. Transportation concerns and a private space that is for and reflects teens. We're hearing, we're listening, we're continuing to engage with our community who are both voicing concerns about this process and those who are hearing about teen services for the first time, which, as we've gone out into community and tabled at these community events, that really is the big initial theme from the event tabling is, wow, we didn't even know that you had teen programs, we didn't know that you had teen services. Thank you for coming out to community and providing that option for us. We continue to update our web pages, our FAQs, and advocating for and trying to get the word out so that our teens understand the resources available to them. We've held a mix of more formal meetings along with more open house style formats to really engage and take action on some of the concerns voiced by our drop-in and music enthusiast cohorts specifically. The clear message from teen themselves is that they want meaningful civic participation and transparency. We're promoting and seeing success in our RIPAC and integrating teens into city decision-making processes, and not just programming for them, but with them, while tabling tabling at events in the schools and conducting tours of the teen spaces at the Redmond Community Center at Marymore Village. Parents, caregivers, and community members identified that having a stronger sense of belonging and connection with other teens, support for future career and academic success, and a safe and supportive environment as key unmet needs. Moving forward, we'll continue community engagement through both our planned and impromptu events. There are several: Pride in the Park, Battle of the Bands, Youth for Us business fairs, Derby Days, to mention a few, while continuing our outreach to the families and teens not currently using services or programs. The community clearly values transparency about this process, investment in creative programming, and most importantly, having authentic teen voice in the process. With that in mind, for the listening public, I do have a few key dates that we hope to have you join us for in person or to simply circle it on your calendar. Starting with tomorrow, May 28th. We'll be having a community listening session at the Redmond Senior and Community Center from 6 to 8 p.m. We will be breaking up into small groups, and our hope is to gather input on the community's hope and ideas surrounding teen programming and services. Throughout June, staff will be out in the community tabling at a variety of community events, including celebrating Pride on June 7th during our promenade in the park at Farrell McWhorter Park, an all-ages free event from 1 to 2:30 p.m. July 22nd, I'll be back with an update at PES on teen programs and services. In addition, that is also scheduled to be the study session on OFH itself. The plan is to have the analysis and reports from those contractors conducting those assessments, and that analysis will be shared with council and community. September 9th is the study session that we'll be at discussing the final report on this engagement process, and we look forward to your questions. And part of the reason I'm here today is to hopefully take your feedback and anything that you would like to see, whether in those PES updates or in that final report. This list is not exhaustive, and so it will continue to point to people to our redmond.gov/teen services website to stay up to date on all things teen services. I want to ensure there's open dialogue, and if there's anything in particular that council or committee wants to see me touch on, I'd love that feedback. With that, I'd like to open up for questions.
Council? Council Vice President Forsythe?
Thank you. Just noticing that the amount of respondents, we only have about a quarter of them that are actual teens. Have we done outreach with Lake Washington schools about getting that survey out that way? And how can we get more teens to respond?
Yes. Yes, that's the key and core question that we're obviously trying to hit. And so we've tabled at 4 different Lake Washington schools. Okay. Off the top of my head, I believe it's the high school, Rose Hill, the middle school, as well as I forget the fourth off the top of my head. We're also going to be having Stella Scala Middle School come to City Hall in June, and so I'll be taking that opportunity to take a quick poll of those future teens and hearing what they want to see as they become teens in Redmond.
Great. Looking forward to any way we can get more teen engagement. I know it's hard, so good luck.
Agreed. Thank you.
Council President, and then Council Member Fields.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to bring this up at talk time, but since we have this item, I just wanted to note, I think we have at least 5 council members who are planning to attend the listening session tomorrow. And so you'll note that we were going to do break it up, but in the end, the first one got scheduled, I think, the day before we knew about it. So we ended up not having any council members attend that, so everyone wanted to attend this one, so we ended up noticing it as a public meeting. Can you just give us a quick kind of primer for council members who are attending to know kind of the best way to participate in order to support kind of what's going on there?
Yeah, absolutely. So tomorrow there will be hopefully a lot of community members in attendance. We'll be in the Red Oak Room to start. I will be leading it off. We'll be handing off to multiple Parks and Recreation staff to talk about the day, to also talk about some of our open house engagement, and really as we hear public comment and as we are out in community hearing some of the feedback on this process, we've really tried a coordinated effort to get teens in the room, ask specific questions on what, in the current space, how can we help them feel more comfortable? So that's the initial start. Then we'll break up into small affinity groups based on whether you're a teen, a future teen, community member, service provider, et cetera. And that's really the core of tomorrow. Council members are encouraged and more than welcome to kind of go to each affinity group, listen. You are all residents, so I would love your feedback as well. There won't really be any speaking engagement opportunities for council, but we'd love for you to engage with our community and hear what they're saying.
Great. So what I'm hearing, so there'll be facilitators
Correct.
those conversations, and we'll have kind of the chance to listen in.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, and maybe if we are talking to community members, we can let them know if they want to have a dialogue the next day, they can join us in Grasslawn Park and come to our council conversations. But yeah, thank you for kind of helping us to know what we can envision.
You bet. That, yep.
Councilmember Fields?
Yeah, thank you. So way back when I took a class in communications, one of the key points was your message is only as good as it was received. And ever since I've been on council, transparency, public engagement has always been an issue. And I appreciate the sincerity, the approach that you described. But there's a miss somewhere, clearly, in what is considered real transparency, real accountability. I mean, we've had business meetings with a lot of public testimony. I can't ignore the evidence that somehow they don't believe it. So the question I would like to see asked is some way to understand the expectations of that transparency. What are we doing that we could do better? What do they think they're not hearing? What do they think we might not be saying? Some sort of quality assessment of our engagement. We think I raised 3 kids. I would tell them things, and then they would look at me blankly like I'd never said it before. So, and I finally read a book, How to Talk to Kids So They'll Talk to You. So maybe that's a little bit of shift in more around them and what they think they need to hear.
Yeah, I appreciate that, council member, and really that's the sole focus on these community listening sessions is to hear from teens, to hear what transparency questions that they may have, and so staff will be there, staff will be facilitating, and hopefully we can answer those, in the moment. Again, my promise to you is that I will provide this information in a transparent manner, as well as for the listening public to understand what are the next steps and what are the timeline of events, because yeah, it's a little bit convoluted on the building versus teen programs and services. So we look forward to answering those questions in an in-person event.
Wonderful. Any other comments or questions? Deputy Director, thank you. I've got just one, and it's not a question, just a comment. Something that I found interesting is that not only are we providing programming for our local Redmond teens, but the number of area teens that come in as well is right about equal to Redmond teens. So that was interesting. I'm not making that mean anything. It was just like, oh, that's interesting, and passing along. So thank you very much for hanging out with us today and giving us all this great information. So that is our last item on the agenda. We have now reached the end of today's agenda. Is there anything else for the good of the order? Seeing none, we are adjourned.